Leader Pelosi, on Monday, the FBI director is coming to testify. What would you ask him?
Well, I'm not on the committee, but I would hope that the members of the committee would ask for some clarity. I hope that they would ask him to deny that what we know would be the fact that what the president charged President Obama with wiretapping him is not true. I think it's really important because that's a terrible accusation to make. And what are they doing but doubling down on it now, of quoting sources saying that the president worked with the British intelligence to also spy on the president. Of course, it's not true. And it's really, and they said the president was bad and sick, President Obama. So let's just grow up. Why doesn't it grow up? The Justice Department, the FBI has to really clear this. Because otherwise this administration has decided that they, with impunity, can say anything, and it's really damaging.
So you think Director Comey should come to the hearing and just put this on the table and clear this up right away?
I think he should, and certainly if he doesn't, I think that he should be asked to do so, and why wouldn't he? And why wouldn't the Justice Department do that?
You are a part of the Gang of Eight, those members of Congress who get access to the special level of intelligence, and there's been a majority of the Gang of Eight who said there's no evidence of wiretapping. Is that the way you see it?
Well, the public statements of the, the House Intelligence Committee leadership, Chairman Nunes and Adam Schiff, our ranking member, have spoken with great clarity on that subject.
Have you seen anything to suggest that there is any connection between anybody who worked in the Trump campaign and the Russians trying to meddle in the election as you look at this?
I think there is a need for us to have an outside investigation, an independent commission, to see what it is that the Russians have on President Trump, politically, personally, and financially. I think it's really important to do that. Every day we see in the public domain other connections. You see now with Flynn receiving, what, $60-some thousand in payment from the Russian government or Russian entities. How did the president know about that when he appointed him to be his national security advisor?
You want a special investigation into any connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Why can't it be done just by the Justice Department and the FBI?
Well, why won't they do it? You know, in other words, there are different things. There's an investigation that could take place in the Intelligence Committee and House and Senate. I was part of that at 9/11 as one of the 4 co-chairs of that joint investigation. But we also had the outside 9/11 Commission. So you can only go so far within the Congress. Let's take it away from Congress or any political motivation and just put it outside apolitically. The other thing is that there can be some form of an independent counsel, a special prosecutor, has different names, that the Justice Department could appoint, and that would be a path as well. Not as good as the independent commission, but a path.
The FBI is investigating whether there are any connections between Russian meddling in the election and the Trump campaign. You said of FBI Director Comey before the election, you said he clearly has a double standard when it comes to Donald Trump.
Yes.
Do you still believe that?
Well, what I was referencing was that in the first week of October, all of the agencies, intelligence agencies, signed off on a statement that Russia was hacking our electoral system in terms of, well, I know for sure from the DCCC without them telling me, but they signed a letter, a statement of consensus. They signed off on a statement of consensus that the Russians were involved. Director Comey said he couldn't sign off on that because it was too close to the election. 2 weeks later, he issues a statement that he's investigating Hillary Clinton's emails, which he said may be of no significance, but we're investigating them. Now that's like 10 days before the election. That's a double standard.
Do you think, though, do you think Director Comey, do you have faith in Director Comey to carry out the investigation into Russian efforts to meddle in the election and any connections with the Trump campaign?
Well, I think it's possible that he can do that. I think that what he did was wrong during the election, but I don't know who they would appoint. There's always a question of that. But I've always had admiration for Director Comey before he was there, when he was Assistant Attorney General, and he acted very courageously in the Bush administration when it came to surveillance and the rest of that. So I have like there's a mixed record there, and I'm hopeful that he could go forward in a very positive way. And I think it's important for the director of the FBI not to be subjected to the president thinking he's going to investigate him, so he would terminate his service.
Republican Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma has suggested that President Obama is owed an apology by President Trump for President Trump's wiretapping claim. Do you agree with him?
Good for him. Good for him for saying that. And you know what? It's not just about this allegation that President Trump has made. It's about the frivolity of it all. I call him the deflector in chief. He'll come up with anything to change the subject from something that's not going well for him. He has sent nothing over here to create jobs, no bill, no infrastructure. There's nothing that there's no accomplishment in his term of office so far, and there could be, has the House and Senate and the signature in the White House. So to just take attention away from Flynn or this, that, and the other thing, he comes up with these schemes which are beneath the dignity, not only beneath the dignity of the office of the president, beneath the responsibility of the President of the United States to respect the office he serves in.
Should President Trump apologize to President Obama?
Yes, he most certainly should, and to the American people.
Let me ask you on the let's switch to health care. When you were trying to get the Affordable Care Act through, you said it needed to pass in order for people to experience what was in it, for them to, you know what was in the bill, but people, in order to experience what it was offering, they needed to have some interaction with it. Isn't that essentially what Paul Ryan is saying?
No, thank you for asking that question, because you can have me put it in context. The Senate had not acted. They were asking about the impact of the bill. So we have to pass it, we have to get through the legislative process, because the Senate had not. We had two somewhat different bills, the House and the Senate. The Senate had not acted yet. So that was in that context. But all of us learned from the implementation of a bill, and there's some things that we could do to improve the implementation of the Affordable Care Act right now, and wish the Republicans would work with us to do that, or we can work with them to do that. But what they have put forth is a terrible bill. 24 million people kicked off of health insurance, which the Speaker calls an act of mercy. An act of mercy. And then at the same time, a few more days later in the week, they put out a budget which the OMB director, Mulvaney, says is compassionate to take money from Meals on Wheels and give it to the Defense Department. We all want to support, we take an oath to protect and defend our country, but our strength is measured in more ways than just taking money from the health, education, and well-being of the American people, which is a source of our strength. So compassionate acts of mercy, I don't know what faith that is.
When you look at this health care bill that's been put forward, is it Ryan care? Is it Trump care? Is it Republican care? How do you think about it?
I think it's Trump care, because the fact is it's becoming more and more Trump care. The fact is this: the president really either doesn't know or doesn't care about what is in the affordable health care. The affordable health care's purpose was to lower cost, expand access, and improve benefits. It has succeeded in all three. It should be judged it should be respected for what it does. We should judge it for what it doesn't do and work hard to improve it. Some of the reasons, some places which we would improve need improvement because the Republicans obstructed that implementation of it. So when he talks about his bill, imagine a bill that takes 4 million people out of health insurance, gives the biggest transfer of wealth in our country's history, $600 billion taken from working class families in our country, middle class and those who aspire to it, to the top 1%. $600 billion. Robin Hood in reverse. Some people call it Ryan Hood. But this is Trump. The Republicans will find any excuse to pull money up to the high end at the expense of the working class. And what's so strange about it all is many of the millions of people who are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act voted for Donald Trump. They live in red areas. that money will be taken from red areas, and many of the people who will be advantaged by the money going to the high end will be in blue areas. How's that? It's so wrong.
As you have said, there are issues with the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
I mean, there are high premiums, high deductibles. In some places, there's only one insurer. Insurance companies are leaving. Have the Democrats offered something that could meet them halfway, meet Republicans halfway, or to deal with some of those issues?
No, it's not a question of halfway. It's like a little bit pregnant. You either have health care or you don't. You either have an agenda that is a public-private partnership or you don't. But the fact is that the one of the Humana who got a big hoop-de-doo for leaving, they have 159,000 policyholders, not that many. But the individual market is challenging, and we can do more to help on the individual market. The co-pays and the out-of-pockets, they will go up more under the Trump care. They will go up more under Trump care. And the fact is that you cannot retain any of the benefits of no discrimination on pre-existing condition, no lifetime limit to that benefit that people have. Child can stay on your policy until 26. You can't do that unless you have the big pool that the Affordable Care has, and you have a mandate. So you can't say, I'm going to give you all the goodies, but none of the responsibility. And that's what the president is saying. But I think listening to him, and I listened to him very carefully, I respect the office he holds. I respect the people who voted for him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And when he says death spiral and this and that, he really doesn't know what he's talking about. That's most unfortunate. And so this product is Trump care.
The president says, in an interview with Tucker Carlson, he said, if we submitted the Democrats' plan, drawn everything perfect for the Democrats, we wouldn't get one vote from the Democrats. What he's saying essentially is there is such opposition.
When he speaks, understand that he's projecting.
But what could you work with the President Trump?
Well, first of all, we're not working with anybody who says we're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Repeal? No, that's
well,
not
then he's
happen.
right, basically.
No, he isn't. No, he isn't. He's saying you have to have a bill, and we have something that actually was developed at the Heritage Foundation, a Republican institution, a conservative institution. Romney Care,
the individual mandate.
The individual mandate. Romney Care in Massachusetts, a Republican governor. So would it have been the bill I would have written? I would have had a public option. I mean, I would have done a different bill. But this was a private sector, market economy piece of legislation that works. And if they want to, and it's implemented. It's implemented. So it's rolling something back. You have to be totally irresponsible to do that. What they do think, of course, that Medicare should wither on the vine. They do, they have tried to privatize Social Security. So it's important for the public to understand that we have different priorities when it comes to the public role. And that has usually been a reasonable debate between Democrats and Republicans in the history of our country. With this president, we have the deconstruction of government. So they really don't want anything where there is a public role.
I guess the question I would ask is, as people are looking at this complicated issue of health care and they don't know what to think, the question is whether Democrats are really going to work with this president because either of the positions he's taken or the things he's said, whether there really is an opportunity here for any kind of bipartisanship of the old-fashioned way.
What is it that he is putting forth? He said he was going to put forth infrastructure. We said we look forward to working with him on it. But he has put forth nothing. We look forward to doing tax reform. We need to do that, to lower the corporate rate, to have fairness and transparency in our tax code, but he hasn't put anything forward. So we want to see a jobs bill. He says he wants to renegotiate NAFTA. Our members look forward to that, but we haven't seen anything. So there's a lot of talk. Now, you know what I would say? We have walked the walk. We haven't talked the talk. We haven't conveyed our message adequately to the American people. But so many of the people
As Democrats.
As Democrats, yeah. I'm talking about Democrats. We. I know we the people, but we.
Right.
But it isn't about Democrats or Republicans. This is about our country. It's about our country. And we have, for over 200 years, had this back and forth between the parties as to the role of government in the solutions and helping to make life better for the American people. This is very different. In fact, let me just tell you another example. On the subject of immigration, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker, President Ronald Reagan, President George Herbert Walker Bush, President Clinton, President Bush again, President Obama have all been pro-immigration presidents. This is the first president in this generation who has come out in such a negative way. And that is really unfortunate for our country because it has brought forth some negative attitudes from the American people as well. But he's very different from the 3 Republican presidents in this generation who have preceded him.
On the question of immigration, though, President Trump, because he's been so hard as a campaigner, doesn't he have a possible opportunity to sort of, as Republicans say, have a Nixon goes to China moment, where because he's been so tough on immigration, if he said to Democrats, how about offering legal status to people, not a path to citizenship, but legal status, they can keep a job, pay taxes, they won't be deported. Would Democrats join him in that, sort of forgetting the rhetoric that he said, but does he have an opportunity because he has such credibility in his own party on that issue?
Well, let me just say, what he said in the campaign has caused pain, instilled fear, and the rest of that. It's easy. It's hard to dismiss and just say, it's easy, let's go to the next step. But no, I wouldn't support, and I don't think our Democrats would support, a legalization without a path to citizenship. And the poll that came out today says that 90% of the American people support a path to citizenship. 87% of Republicans. And a path to citizenship doesn't mean you get in line ahead of everybody else. You get on a path that could take years. You're at the back of the line of everyone else who has been waiting in the normal course of legal immigration.
How does the American Health Care Act drama play out as you see it?
I don't know. I think we're in a situation right now where the Republican leadership has really made fools of their members on the committee by saying, vote for this bill without knowing what's in it. And a few days later, they find out they voted for a bill that kicks 24 million people off of health insurance and gives the biggest infusion of wealth to the wealthiest people in our country, $600 billion. Now they're saying to the general membership, you've seen the numbers, this thing probably won't pass in the Senate, but we want you to walk the plank and support this thing. Now, if it was going to become law, they might say, this is what I believe, and so I did that for the greater good as they viewed it. But the fact is, they're going to walk the plank, and what's going to happen in the Senate, who knows? But they will have voted to kick 24 million people off and the biggest transfer of wealth, and the list goes on and on about the bad things that are in there. So I think that they have really done a disservice to their members. What happens in the Republican caucus, I'm the last person to ask.
On the economy, you mentioned that the president hasn't moved on a jobs bill or infrastructure. But if you look at the optimism among CEOs in terms of polling, you look at the stock market, you look at the jobs numbers, which in some way reflect future decisions made by CEOs about the future of their companies. If Donald Trump were as bad for the economy, all those numbers wouldn't be in such good shape. They seem quite good for him.
Well, remember when President Obama took office, the stock market was in the 6,000 variety. When he left, it was around 18,000. So let's give him credit for 12,000 points. Yes, there has been an impression among some of the CEOs that they might hire, and I hope that they do. So let's give the president credit for that. But we really haven't seen the initiative for the future, which is about bigger paychecks, and not just hiring people, but having a substantial increase in their pay as relates to productivity. And that's what we have to see. We have to see an initiative. See, I thought for his address to the House and Senate a few weeks ago that he'd come out and say, we're in a new world. We have to respect the workforce that we have and the jobs we have, but we also have to prepare for what artificial intelligence, technology, and all the rest, what impact that's going to have on our workforce and on our educational system. But he really doesn't have even the faintest notion about the future.
Let me ask you a question about OMB Director Mulvaney, who said this about the president's budget. He said, when you start looking at places where we reduce spending, one of the questions we asked was, can we really continue to ask a coal miner in West Virginia or a single mom in Detroit to pay for these programs? The answer was no. Why isn't that a good way to, when you got a $20 trillion deficit, why not use that as the way to figure your priorities
It's really
out?
stunning that he would mention coal miners in West Virginia, because I didn't even vote for the omnibus bill at the end of the year because they did not take care of the coal miners in West Virginia or their widows and orphans. So for him to use that phrase is something quite appalling. You can't see it right here, but I have a coal miner carved out of coal right there as a tribute to the hard work they do. Even though I think that coal is not good for the environment, I do think we have a responsibility to the workers. And so he didn't say anything about tax reform so that we have fairness in our tax code and we have people shipping money overseas and the rest to avoid paying for our national defense and all of the other values in the preamble to our Constitution.
But just as a general matter, when you're making a budget, isn't it maybe a good idea to say, well, if I can't explain this to the coal miner in West Virginia, why his tax dollars should pay for Corporation for Public Broadcasting or National Endowment for the Arts, that why is that wrong to use that as a sorting technique for spending
Because the
money?
Corporation for Public Broadcasting is like this hair on my head compared to the budget. The budget, now they're talking about $54 billion coming out of the domestic agenda into the Defense Department. We all take an oath to protect and defend our country, and we want to do that. But the strength of our country is measured in the health, the education, the well-being of the American people, and the strength of our economy as well. And so and then just in terms of budget, they're taking money out of diplomacy. They're taking money out of areas that are part of our strength, diplomatic soft power. How could they be doing that? I mean, what is it? Over 20% cut in diplomacy, while they give a 10% increase, $54 billion. And the diplomatic budget is very small.
Let me ask you a final question. The Democratic Party was in a little bit of disarray and in the doldrums after the election. Has the fight for health care energized the Democratic Party in the Congress?
Well, I don't think that we're in the doldrums. I have to tell you very honestly, after the election, was sad as we were that Hillary Clinton wasn't going to be president, and mystified as we were that Donald Trump was, the fact is that people immediately, I've never seen such a sense of urgency come forth and saying, what can I do to help? And so people were very enthusiastic. And then you saw the day after the inauguration, you saw the March on Washington, and that enthusiasm continues. It's not political. It's about issues, it's about values, it's about America, and all of those people want to help. So things are going very well. We are the Democratic Party. We are diverse. We are not homogenous. We are very diverse, and that's part of our strength. Now, you have Republicans who say that diversity is not the strength of America. For example, Stephen King saying that we cannot restore civilization with other people's babies. And that's probably a good place for us to end here on a Sunday morning, where we have to work harder to rid our country of the negative attitudes of people who are anti-somebody because of their religion, because of their ethnicity, because of their gender, if it's LGBT or whatever, anti-women even, because they're foreigners or whatever it is. And that's where we as Americans, forgetting Democrats and Republicans, have to work much harder to overcome what we saw in that election, in which we see members of Congress saying things like that, Steve King, and then saying, my colleagues are patting me on the back. So we have a lot to, as Senator Mitchell said at the Irish dinner the other night, he said, we have a lot to be concerned about. There's some things we have to be concerned about in our country, but we have a lot more to be grateful for in this, the greatest country that ever existed. Happy St. Patrick's Day weekend. You know, we celebrate in San Francisco St. Patrick's Day well until after Easter, and then we start celebrating Cinco de Mayo well before May 5th.
It's just one constant party in San Francisco.
Well, it's all one ethnic celebration.
Leader Pelosi, thanks so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.